Hello, my name is Wendy Potomsky and I'm the managing partner and owner of Retake Furniture Rentals. Retake is once again a proud supporter of the Canadian Film Festival and is working to contribute to the Canadian film and TV industry by making it an easy and sustainable place to do business. Retake provides sustainable short and long-term furniture rental options to meet production schedules and product needs. Retake also understands the importance of set design and the dynamic nature of the film and TV industry, which is why we created a company to specifically support Canadian filmmakers. Retake can assist you in setting up your production office with sustainable alternatives to keep your team working safely as we all head back to work. We use sustainable approaches to minimize product going to landfill, which means any product supplied by Retake is helping to support the circular economy. Our in-house upholstery services can tailor our product to meet your set design requirements and match your color schemes. Contact us to discuss your office furniture needs. Our goal is to help you get back to work as safely and efficiently as possible. Stay safe, everyone, and enjoy the films and shorts at this year's Canadian Film Festival.
Celebrate Canadian filmmakers on Super Channel Fuse with an exclusive homegrown event.
I'm ready.
Go.
The Canadian Film Fest, presented by Super Channel, brings this year's festival into your home for a second year as a virtual experience.
Goodbye.
Every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night until April 18th. Enjoy the premieres of indie films and shorts from critically acclaimed and up-and-coming Canadian producers and directors.
And this is where the donkey starts talking.
Immerse yourself in this inspiring and spirited event, both on air and online, with live Facebook Q&A sessions that follow the films.
Makes sense.
Start it.
Experience the Canadian Film Fest, proudly presented by Super Channel.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Canadian Film Festival. Thanks for joining us for a Q&A with our filmmakers of the evening. My name is Mark Kishodi. I'm one of the programmers for the festival.
And my name is Laura Good. I'm also in the festival programmers. Thanks for joining us.
Tonight's feature film was The Last Villains, Mad Dog and the Butcher, and we're going to be joined by the director in a moment. But before that, we want to talk about the short film that preceded it, Acting Out. And here to join us is the director, Sebastian Gagnon. Welcome to the festival, Sebastian. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So it's a really delightful doc, and it's thinking a lot about, who these young actors are and the kind of grand roles they want to play. Can you tell us a little bit about, just to start off, where did the idea come from? What was the genesis of this project?
I went to a Kino Cabaret in Shanghai in 2016. I went there with three friends, filmmakers, and we showed up at the address that we had. And we learned that it's a school, and then we're taken to like a big empty space upstairs, and we don't really know what's going on. There's not a lot of people speak English. They don't seem to know why we're here. And then suddenly you have these bunch of kids, like from 12 to 16, that just come in, and there's a kind of stage, and they go on it, and there's a big, we guess it's a kind of show and tell. They just go on the stage and do some monologues. They do some animal work. Some parts of them are in English when they present themselves, but most of it is in Mandarin. And just this big weird moment where like the four of us are super jet lagged. We don't really know what's going on. It's not how a Kino Cabaret is supposed to work. And then we realized that the cabaret is set up in a school, and there's kind of partnership between the cabaret and that school for young talents and actors. And we're supposed to make films with them. And I just focused on that moment where we don't really know what's going on. They're like eager to meet us, but we don't understand each other. And there's kind of mixed feeling, mixed vibe that moment. And that's where I got the inspiration for the movie, where there's two visions clashing with each other, their hopes and dreams as actors, and there's a documentary part and there's a fiction part, and then I start mashing up like different roles and then inventing a story with it and just making those quick scenes. So that's where I got the inspiration.
And the body of the story, or the body of the film structure, is really those first person to camera interviews interspersed with these wonderful whimsical details. How did you settle on the subjects that you did and zero in on them to get these compelling, wonderful interviews and stories? What was that process like?
Like the main thing is like just asking them, what's your dream role? Like why do you want to act? and if you get to act someday, what would be your dream role? And then I just like zeroed in on the one that I thought would do the most interesting character. And then after I did the interview, I think I did interviews for 2 days. I just matched them and like took two characters that I think would made a good story, and then we meet up at the location, and then we improvised what would be a scene. I shot it, I think, 4 times each. It was pretty quick, but yeah, I wanted to let it, improvise and go with the flow with them, and not trying to direct too much. That's why most of it is from them, actually.
And what would you say, what percentage of those that you actually filmed and interviewed made it into the final film?
Oh, all of them.
All of them. Wow.
Oh yeah. I just first off, we met a lot of them because parallel to that, other films were being made, like other fiction films or other subject, and I was helping on all of those other projects as more a technician or just being there. So I kind of met them already, and I chose 5 of them, and then I did the interview and then scenes.
Fantastic. We have a question from Emma here asking more about the school. Can you give us a little more information if you have it? What is their curriculum like? How many students are there? How do they kind of learn this craft there?
I don't have that much information because, like I said, it was kind of a go with the flow moment, and a lot of people were speaking English. But it's called the Shanghai Holmes College. There was a lot of musical training, dancing, acting, and that's where you can see from the movie. Also, from I think what would be high school 1 to 3, they do a lot of animal work. So there are a lot of these plays where they play monkeys or wolves or I think lions. So they embody those animals, and then there are those plays with there's no like lines. They just embody like animal, and then they do these 20-minute plays. So they do a lot of this. So that's why there's a character that's a gorilla, because she said that's actually that's the first one that we saw when there was this show and tell when we got there. So we're like sitting in the corner, we don't know what's going on, and there's this girl go up on the stage and just embody a monkey for 3 minutes, and we're like, what is happening?
And what did your effects team look like? I imagine it's pretty difficult to prepare to this like improvisational structure where you're having these interviews. You don't know what the students are going to come out with as their dream roles and scenarios, and you're pivoting and reacting on the spot to create these really elaborate, wonderful effects. What did that look like, and how many people were involved with that part of the process? Was it mostly in post, I assume?
I'm glad that you're saying that they're elaborate, but they're really not. It's pretty simple. I just used different layers in Final Cut. I think back in the day it was 2016, so it's Final Cut 7. So really basic layers that I had on the drive that I brought with me with sound effects and a couple.
Okay, so you did it all yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they're really great.
I wanted to keep them simple, and they do what they do. Like, it's basic, but it works. And I use them. I wanted to, like, it's a mix between doc and fiction, and it's a mix between their character coming to life, and I wanted to use the special effects as something that happens, and you don't think it's gonna be that kind of movie with special effects. And at the end, the kid is like shooting with a fake gun, and he's doing the sound with his voice. But then I wanted to surprise with adding, special effects and sound effects and everything to like it's becoming real in this reality that we created for the scene.
Yeah, it's not just a hybrid between fiction and documentary. It's also a hybrid between realism and magical realism, or this sort of almost psychological realism of the imagination. Yeah, and is that a theme that kind of carries through your other work, or that you hope to carry through into future work?
I really like the idea of having a mix between, like, using the documentary part to do the research, and then using the filmmaking apparatus to make the imagination come to life or interact with the character. I have another project that I want to experiment more with this kind of technique. So I think I found something there that I want to explore more, in other words. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but we want to thank you again, Jean-Sebastian, for bringing your film to our festival. It was a really lovely watch, and it pairs so beautifully with our feature film tonight.
So thanks a lot for selecting it, and thanks for this interview.
It's our pleasure.
Wonderful to speak to you. Thanks for joining us.
See you around. Thanks.
See you. Bye.
Hello, welcome back to our Q&A to talk about our feature film of the evening. Now we're joined by Thomas Renfrey, the director of The Last Villains, Mad Dog and the Butcher. Thomas, this was such a lovely film, and Paul is such a charismatic persona. Why don't you start by telling us, how did you meet him? How did this project come about?
Yeah, Paul is very interesting, and this is one of the main things that made me very interested in making this movie at first. When I met Paul, the way it all happened is our producer Valerie Bissonnette was I was working on another project with her, and she quickly said, between two meetings, she said, well, I might have the rights to tell the stories about the Vachon family. I was not a wrestling fan. I was just I had been doing documentaries about athletes and sports and everything, but I knew that's before I met Paul, and I already knew that there was a lot of potential in the wrestling world. Mm-hmm. Even though I didn't know much about it, I knew that there was a fantastical potential, something that could go beyond whatever I had done before that was sport related. So, and then we, because I asked the question, I said, well, what can we say about this story of the Vachon? And so she said, well, there's only one of them that is still alive, and he's getting old, and he's been sick, and he's still sick, and we don't know how long he's going to be able to tell the stories for. So I said, well, we have to make an interview right now, as soon as we can, so we can have his versions of all the stories, or their story. So we did that, and that's where I met him, and that's where I fell in love with the character. That's where I knew I was gonna follow him, and I knew then that it was not only gonna be an interview or just a quick thing, I knew it was gonna be something else. And after we finished the first interview, I asked him, I said, can I follow you? Can I go further with this? And he started calling me after that. Thomas, we're doing this. We're going there. Do you want to come? And that was it. It took 4 years. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's such an interesting film, because when you say it's about a famous wrestler, you immediately start to think of sports documentaries, and you were talking about how you've done sports documentaries in the past, but it's much less a sports documentary, and it feels much more like a film that's thinking about memory and myth making and family. So can you talk a little bit about, was it always your idea to make a film that's thinking about those things as well, or did it come naturally along the process?
It was always my idea to not treat it as a wrestling documentary. Mm-hmm. I wanted to do something that was more universal, if I can say. Mm-hmm. So just by having this goal, everything I was shooting was related with Paul's health or Paul's family, or it was always, aiming at those theme. And Paul gave that to me. So Paul was open, and he was never, he always answered the question openly, and even giving me more. So I mean, it was it was my intention, but it also came naturally at the end. Yeah.
He's such a he's such a fun personality, because partly because he really loves the role of the villain, and he really loves telling and sharing these stories. And you get the sense that sometimes he's embellishing stories a little, or if not embellishing, he's telling them in a way for maximum impact, right? For example, there's that bit where he's talking about his burnt house, and he talks about, maybe it was an enemy of the Vachons. So can you talk a little bit about, what was your sense listening to these stories? And obviously there's nothing malicious about the way he's embellishing any of it, but what sense did you get hearing about sort of his history and his family's history directly from him?
I think you're pointing at one of the most interesting thing for me approaching this film is that by getting to know Paul, I starting to realize that he was embellishing stories, and but then I had the choice. I mean, I could have stayed to the fact and always say, Paul, are you sure of what you're saying? But that's not what I wanted to do. I mean, I just wanted to jump in and believe, believe almost everything he was saying, or at least go with it. And I think the film is about that too. I mean, it's about, someone who recalls or remembers his life, and sometimes there was a 50,000 people crowd, and at the same match, it was maybe the next day it's 100,000 people, and it would change like that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the chance, we took a decision with Annick Charlebois, who's co-script, to just follow Paul and let him tell us his stories.
I'd say the film very much, to me, also, it feels like a character study more than it does like a sports film or like a wrestler film. And I think that you really give him so much room to breathe as a character study, and that is true to who he is as a character, that embellishment, so it's as honest of a portrayal as you can get of who he is as a person and what he's trying to communicate about himself and his life to the world.
Yeah.
And
I think, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I like the fact that as you approach and you make a documentary, and you think, well, you have to tell the truth, you have to be to verify the facts, but in this particular situation, you kind of don't have to. Although we did for things that were very important in time, we made sure that this was okay, that's true, this is the right person, or we did our job as a documentary makers. I mean, making sure the facts were right, but not for Paul's stories.
Definitely. And I think one of the reasons you're so successful at that as a filmmaker is sort of the outsider perspective that you were talking about, where you're not a wrestling fan, you're not a part of the fandom coming in, you're not as familiar with all of those nuances, you're just approaching it as a human piece of storytelling. Would you agree that sort of distance gave you some unique insight? And did that change at all over the 4 years that you spent getting to know this man so well?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And it didn't change. I mean, what changed is my relation with Paul. I mean, we got closer. I got to know him. I also started to feel that he was at the end starting to tell the same stories all the time, because that's the stories he remembers. So at one point it was hard to get other things. So I had to work harder. It's not that I wanted stories, or because it would it was more like watching him live than having him telling us stories at although at one point in the editing room you have to make choices and but filming on when I was filming, the more I was filming, the more I got to know him, and the more and the closer and the more he had the sense of what I wanted to do. He's been in the show business his whole life, so to him he figured it out and it worked. I mean, he would do sometimes, in documentary filmmaking, sometimes you're planning a day of shooting and it's not going the way you think it was going to go, and you have to figure something out. We don't want to waste a day of having the crew with us and everything. So Paul, I would tell him, well, what do you think if we go there instead? Or what do you think if we go take a walk, or you take a walk with this person, and you talk, and he was always, yeah, no problem. And he would go on, and it was easy with him.
Yeah. You talked about choices a little bit, so I think it's a good time to bring this question from Tim. He's asking, are there any specific stories that you talked about or any moments that couldn't make it in the film that you can talk about now?
Yes, just too many. We had to the editing part of this process was very demanding.
Mm-hmm.
You have
said
to
you shot over 4 years, right?
Yeah, I had a lot of footage. You also have to try to figure out that there was no book. I mean, the book you see in the film does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we had the book and we just had to, so we had to make this book to help us tell the stories, or the story. And then we had to choose from all the small or big stories that Paul was either had written in his book, in his 3 different books, or that he had told me. But to just pick something, I mean, he told us stories like the way when he started wrestling, that there was I mean, he didn't want us to. He wanted there was a story where he started wrestling and the coach was trying to touch him when he was wrestling. He was a young boy, and he told us the story, and he felt, a bit uncomfortable because it's something that really he had to react, and it's not in Paul's nature. He's such a smooth person, but then he felt that coach was going too far. So that was a very touching story that we could not put in the film for different reason. I mean, it's not because he didn't want us to put it in there. It's just the way it was told and the elements that we had. It's sad. I mean, sad stories like that, we had a lot. Crazy stories, we had a lot. I mean, we could make a book. We could make another movie with Paul. That's for sure. Yeah.
You talked about the book. What makes the film work so well is sort of this format of the book that you're kind of following, where we're going through chapters. Can you talk about when that came in as a structural idea for the film? Was it late? Was it early on?
It came early, but it came late too. I mean, early in the process, I had this idea of making this film a book. I mean, in the film, and then we put this idea aside because you always try to use as less elements as possible. I mean, you're trying to have your film, stand by itself, and it was sort of a goal for me. But the more I was working with Anik, the more I realized that the book was essential to our movie, because we needed to tell other stories that Paul didn't tell us, or that he told us, but it took too much time, or it wasn't at the right spot, it wasn't at the right place, the sound was not good, or different reasons. So by taking control of the story like that, was going to enable us to maneuver from one spot, like let's say Paul is in Las Vegas and the next day we're in Alberta. Then I was able to jump from one thing to another much easier.
Yeah.
Much easily. So and by making it a book that Paul wrote, because Paul really did wrote his 3 books, so we were able to just kind of use that and make it as if it was one of them, and that would give us a first-person narrator, so I wouldn't lose Paul along the way. So that was a very important thing, to not to have a narrator to tell about them, but to tell about him. So although it's not Paul who's talking, who's the voiceover or the storyteller at some point in the film, you still, I hope, feel that it's as if it was him.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the structure works fantastically.
They often say that this story writing process, or the story structure, or the through line in documentary comes in post, whereas in fiction filmmaking, of course, it comes in development. And that actually dovetails really nicely into an audience question we have from Alex on YouTube, which is, how long did it take you to go through the editing process for this film, with all of these factors you're talking about, with the framing structure and 4 years of footage? What was the edit like?
And you must have had so much archival footage as well, right?
Yeah, that was
Exactly.
yeah. I go back to Annick Charlebois' work there, because she did amazing work with the archival search. So, but the whole process, it was kind of like a triangle, I would say. We had Annick as a script writer with me, and I had Benoit, who was the editor. So we were 3, and I was kind of in the middle of us, and I was working with Annick for a while, writing and putting the cards on the wall together. What comes when, and that took months. I mean, it was long. Then the book arrived, the idea of the book, so that sped. It became fast. The whole process became faster. But then I would go in the editing room and test our ideas, and then come back, and then I would go like that for I don't know, maybe 4 months. I don't know. Okay. It took a while. I was editing myself too, so I would do a bit of work by myself for weeks. So yeah, it was tough, a very tough process, but it was so much fun when I think about it now. Yeah,
that's great. We have a question from Miriam here, asking about Paul's children. One of the most emotional moments in the documentary is hearing from his son talking about sort of the conflict between wanting to share the difficult time that he's been put through, but also not wanting to do that because he thinks it's going to hurt his father. Did you get a sense about Paul's relationship with the rest of his children? Is there?
I think they're similar. It's I'm not sure. I wouldn't be able to answer that question clearly, and only Paul could. But when I went to Alberta to meet his family, I didn't know why I was going there. I mean, Paul told me, I'm going to Alberta to meet my family. My sons were going to be there. Only one showed up, and Andre, his son that showed up, didn't want to be on camera. That's what he said. He said, I don't want to be part of this film. So I got there, and I knew there was a very emotional story, and I could feel I don't know how to say that, but the
Attention.
emotional. What's that?
The tension.
Yeah, well, just there was, you could feel there was something between those two, and I was there for 3 days, and the very last day, Andre came to me and he said, well, I know you want to talk to me, and I see what you do, I see your work, and I'm ready to talk now. So we did sit down, and it was very touching interview. It was tough to edit that part, because I knew when I came back with this footage, when I came back home after the Alberta trip, I knew that I had I had the content that could bring the film where I wanted it to go. It was more than just wrestling stories, Now I had something that was meaningful for Paul, for his family. It was a real portrait. Can you say that? Real portrait of what wrestling or being on the road or choosing a life. It would show the effects on your family that this can have.
Where?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Emma.
no, go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
You've mentioned so many beautiful anecdotes and memorable standout moments. Is there one to you that stands out that you haven't touched on in terms of the experiences you had over 4 years shooting with this gentleman, Paul, and the Vachon family, that you can share with the audience?
Well, if you watch the movie, you see that you meet Paul and you get to know him. And what you see on screen is what you get in real life. So every time I would go somewhere, I never knew what was gonna come up. Paul was just full of magic, I would say.
Was there one moment though that affected you more than others, either on screen or off?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Well, there's a scene that is not in the movie where I went with Paul, the doctor, to just health check. He had many, you see in the movie that he had many cancers and stuff. So we go to the doctor, and I mean, I'm there and I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling that this is something that should be in the movie. So we get out of the doctor's office, and I ask Paul, I say, Paul, I'm going back home. I'm not sure this is gonna make it into the movie, but anyway, we don't know. We never know. So I say, is there anything else around here that could be interesting that we could go see or do? He said, well, not really. I mean, that's where I live. That's where I grew up. So my house used to be up the hill. I said, oh, is it still there? He says, no, it's down. It's broken down and it's burnt and everything. So I'm like, that could be interesting. So this old shoot that was supposed to be the doctor visit ended up being visiting the ruins of his house at the beginning of the movie. So that's just an example of how things would unfold with Paul. Just thought of something and he didn't think it was that interesting, but
So unfortunately, we're just about out of time, but I want to end by asking you the obvious question. Can you give us an update on Paul? How's he been through all this? Has he seen the film? Do you know what his reaction's been?
Yeah, Paul is doing good right now. He's staying home, obviously, but yeah, his life has changed, as you can see in the film, and it really did. And when the first time he saw the movie, he was in tears and he said, well, now I can die. But he hasn't died yet. So we're grateful to still have him around. Sometimes we chat with them, with Paul and Dee, and they're doing good. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So thank you again for sharing your film with us, Thomas. It's really beautiful, and I hope everyone else saw how charming and fun Paul is as a character. We want to thank everyone that's tuning in for watching tonight. We have our final set of films coming next week, and we hope to see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
very much. Thank you very much.
Thomas.
Bye.